Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Wilson from the State Water Survey, and today our webinar is entitled Programs and Services for Well Owners and Professionals. This is the first time we've done this particular webinar, but we have a number of special guests today throughout the RCAP regions, and so we wanted to go through our program and all the things that we offer both to well owners themselves and to those professionals that serve them. And so thanks for joining us today. And this is part of a national program. So RCAP, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, is sort of the parent or the lead on this grant from US EPA. I'm a sub to them at the University of Illinois, and I'm going to talk a lot more about RCAP and the regions in a little bit, so I'll move on from that. This is being recorded, as are all of our webinars, and they're available on our webpage, privatewellclass.org, and on our YouTube page. If you have questions, there'll be time at the end for follow-up. Everyone who registered had the opportunity to ask a question in advance. If you just registered today or yesterday, we might not have your questions on here. Some of them we can probably get to at the end if you want to add them in. And I do want to remind everybody, our university is still working from home. So my daughter's here, she's in class. 5 minutes ago, she was pounding on the my ceiling because she's upstairs doing PE. And so hopefully we won't have an internet problem. That's happened once to us during the pandemic. But those are all the issues we're dealing with today. And hopefully my neighbors don't decide to mow their yard as well. So bear with. If you're a NEHA member and want CEs for this, there's no concerns about the whether you're in your 2-year credentialing cycle today, because we've not offered this before, but we do have some handouts that are on the GoToWebinar screen under the handout tab, and you can email us afterward at info@privatewellclass.org and we'll get you a certificate. And we have this particular webinar registered with NEHA already, and so we're CEs there. We're also an Illinois LEHP provider, and so you can get credit there as well. So the State Water Survey, I'm sure most of you have never heard of, especially if you're out of the state, but every state has a state geological survey. Illinois also has a water survey. It's a sister agency. We were formed in 1895 because of cholera and typhoid outbreaks. And so since then, we house the state's well logs. We help well owners. Until 2006, we offered free water sampling for inorganics and metals to any well owner in Illinois, and that was a state budget issue, and that's changed. But we're housed on the campus of the U of I. We're a quasi-state agency, mostly doing applied research. As an example of a couple things, this is a typhoid outbreak in Pana, Illinois in 1916. Water survey investigated why that occurred. Half the town was sewered. The town had a new water system, but they didn't run it because the mayor said it was too expensive to run. And so our staff went down there expecting to find one of those being the issue. It turned out it was the Pana Ice Cream Company. Everyone got milk from one large tank from 7 different farmers bringing it in, and they all used the same bucket, and it was contaminated. And so they solved that and stopped the typhoid outbreak. And that's just one of the things that's in our files. We have millions of records for all the communities in Illinois specifically, and a lot of really cool old photos. This is one of our lab staff in 1930. And so I'm also going through and archiving all the water surveys records. That's why I have access to some of those things. So moving on, today I'm Steve Wilson. I'm a groundwater hydrologist, and Katie Buckley's also with us. She's a water resources outreach specialist. She'll be fielding your questions online. So again, you can use the chat or the question box to ask questions. Like if something comes up during the webinar where you want to ask a question, type it in there. We're sharing a Google document on the side, and at the end of the webinar, I'll pull that over and we can answer those questions. We also have RCAP's regional private well program staff, or at least one person from each here today. And I'll get into that more here, but they're here also to answer your questions. Part of the theme of today is partnerships and the work that they've done to establish programs all over the country, boots on the ground work, and working with well owners as well as professionals. And this is the regional staff that are the leads. or that are here today. I'm not sure, Dave Miller wasn't here when we started, but hopefully he'll be here. But these are each of the regions. I think I have a map, and I also will have their contact information available. And if you can always email us for that, or this webinar again will be recorded and will be online by the end of the week. And so you can get the information from that recording as well. And so if you're not familiar with RCAP, it's RCAP national offices in Washington, D.C., but it's really made up of the 6 regional affiliates. Each is an independent nonprofit. They go by different names like Communities Unlimited or RCAC, which stands for Rural Community Assistance Corporation. But you can see the states they serve. And so your task today is to know which state that your RCAP region belongs to, or which, and so that you know the right person to contact. And again, if some of this goes by too quick as far as phone numbers or email addresses as we move through, you can email us at info@privatewellclass.org. Everyone who's on the webinar today will get a reminder either an hour or 2 hours after the webinar saying thanks for attending, and that'll have my contact information. I can always get a message to these folks as well. So we're going to talk about these things today. Hopefully I have this in the same order, but really about issues and challenges, value partnerships. And so part of this is for well owners and part of it's for professionals, as I mentioned, so everyone just kind of needs to bear with and understand. And the one thing I'll say when I'm talking about professional relationships or developing partnerships is that if you're a well owner and there are no services in your local area, RCAP can help, or your region can help find those folks, or you can reach out to your soil and water conservation district or your county health department or local health district and ask them about providing some of those services and working with RCAP to do that. So it should be relevant throughout today. I want to just get into the topic here, though. What are the biggest issues affecting drinking water quality? It's really, to me, it's 2 things. I mean, today we have PFAS. 5 years ago, it was lead. Every time there's flooding, it becomes an issue. But those are events. And what holds true year in, year out over time is we have a lot of well owners who don't really know how to take care of their well or don't understand how their well water quality can be affected by their well construction or what they do near their well. Or we have wells that are just poorly constructed because they were installed before their state had well construction code. I personally grew up on an old 14-foot hand dug well that was brick lined with no cement, no cover, and it was in the middle of a ravine. So when it rained, our water was cloudy. And my grandpa hand dug it in 1933 on the farm I grew up on because he felt that was the best place to get water, not understanding that it was a pasture, and so we had runoff from livestock and all those sorts of things. And just basic understanding. And my dad, until the day he died, swore that our well water was better than city water because it didn't have chemicals in it, where cities put chemicals in their water. Well, that's to protect you. And understanding those things is really one of the biggest issues we have with well owners in a lot of cases. The other thing is they're really hard to reach. So for all of us that are trying to do outreach and education, there's a lot of reasons why people are hard to reach. Whether they perceive there's a cost. If I get my well tested and there's something wrong, then I'm going to have to pay for treatment. I don't want to do that. Don't trust the source. If it's a government or whoever, they just believe groundwater is safe, like my dad did. And it's really even human nature. Same as why don't people go to the dentist when they should, or the doctor? Because they'd rather just be afraid of it than deal with it in some cases. So there's a lot of reasons that make them hard to reach. And as well, well owners come from every demographic, every social class, economic class, education class, rural areas like I grew up in, or completely urban areas like Cook County, which is Chicago proper. There's areas there where they were never incorporated, and you have these private wells in the middle of complete industrial and urban settings. So you're trying to reach the entire population, in effect, when you can't target a specific demographic in many cases. And that's part of the issue and why it's a struggle for us to actually be effective at outreach. There's probably, it's estimated there's between 15 and 18 million private wells. I think that estimate's going to go up soon. There's some work being done at EPA, and it's probably closer to 21 or 22 million private wells in the country, serving upwards of 45 million people. And that's actually more people on private wells than there are in communities of 500 homes or less, or 500 population or less, which is really a big thing to think about. There's just a lot of private wells out there. So what other challenges do we have for those of us who are trying to, especially from the health department side, there are different rules in every state. It's governed by different things. Whether you permit a log or whether you have to file a log, or there's, in Mississippi, if it's less than 5 inches diameter, you don't have to report it. In New Jersey, they have one of the more comprehensive rules where every home sale and every transaction of a property with a well, the state has to come in and sample it by law. And that is really the progressive side. And they've actually learned so much about their groundwater and their water resources by doing that. And it makes it out in the open for everybody. Versus Pennsylvania, which is one of the 2 states that still doesn't have well construction code. And though they have a license for drillers, it's a license you just have to pay for. It's not a license that requires you to have training or to take continuing education credit like every other state in the country. And so I could be a licensed well driller in Pennsylvania just by sending in some money. And so it's really not a program where you're guaranteed that because they have a license, they actually have the qualifications, whereas in every other state, those are the rules. And so, people are dealing with different things, especially at the local level. In some places out east, like in the RCAP Solutions area, every health district can set their own rules. And that makes it very local approach. It's very unorganized. It kind of depends sometimes on whether there's a champion in that local organization that takes on private wells as an issue. And all those things work against well owners having understanding and outreach available to them. So we developed this, we were funded by CDC, and we did a study of nearly 100 programs that do outreach to well owners. And from that, and a lot of work looking at other research on interventions and things like that related to public health, we developed this chart and a paper on how to develop an outreach program. And these are the steps. And I just included this one because really it's about building partnerships and earning trust with a local group. And so having the right messenger is a critical piece of all of this. If you are, say, in a small community, maybe the village mayor or the pastor or the bank president is the person that everyone goes to for every question they have, then that's the person you need to develop a partnership with and get them motivated to be a champion on your behalf for private well related issues. And so you don't know who that person's going to be, but if they have the wherewithal to bring in the right partners, to work on, who have the expertise, whether that's a driller or an outreach person like the RCAP folks are, or our program, then that's going to make things much more effective, and you're going to reach more people. And that's kind of the message I wanted to leave everyone with related to that, because part of that study was also to identify how many partners everybody had and why their program was successful or not successful. It was 91 programs that we interviewed. And so there's tons of partners, universities, schools, government, businesses, bank, the fertilizer dealer, you name it, that have an interest. You should try to bring those folks in and work with you. And we actually took the rating for each of these 91 programs, and they were either not successful to extremely successful. And the number of partners they had was one indicator of how successful they were. And the really successful programs had multiple partners, some as many as 7 or 8. And that's what we try to do, and that's what our program, our RCAPS program, actually is today. And it has been extremely successful. And here's why: you share costs, you share effort, you have more people to spread the word, and again, providing local buy-in, especially on a small scale, is critical to having success. I was asked to find, I've done a lot of arsenic research over my time at the State Water Survey, and we were trying to help another university develop a tool to freeze samples at depth with a drill rig. It's called a freeze shoe. They needed a place to do that where there was a lot of arsenic, and we have an aquifer that has a lot of arsenic. And so they wanted us to find a place for them to do this drilling, and they were asking us to find, without any funding, find someone who would give up 2 acres of their land. And this is the middle of farming country. I had no chance of getting a farmer, or actually 3 farmers, to give us 2 acres of ground to take out of production for a year so that they could do this testing. I had someone I knew locally who'd been a water superintendent in this small town. He did a whole bunch of outreach, worked with the schools, developed a program that they started locally. I reached out to him and sold him on this idea. He found all 3 farmers within 2 days, and we would have never been able to do it otherwise. And it just goes to show you the power that someone has locally and why those relationships are so important whenever you're developing partnerships. Okay, so back to RCAP's program. I mentioned it's a lot of partners. Well, we're one of their partners, the University of Illinois. So is NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, National Groundwater Association, and the Water Systems Council, as well as 5 state extension programs in Texas, Virginia, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. And that's important because we recognized, and RCAP recognized, that when our private well program started, these extension programs were already in existence. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or work, and instead of working separately, we invited them in. And so they're a partner in our program, and we've actually expanded the work they do, which also supports then the work that RCAP's trying to do around the country. And they're also a resource. You know, a few of the folks that run these programs have 20, 30 years of experience with private wells, and they're a great resource for all of us. And so quickly, I'm going to just mention NGWA, the National Groundwater Association. They have a website, wellowner.org. They put out monthly tip sheets. They do a thing called Groundwater Awareness Week, which has hundreds. If you haven't heard of that, I'd really be surprised because all over the country, the second week of March, everyone knows they've done it for 21 years. And they also have a really great well owner guide that RCAP staff have available and can pass out to you, or you can get it from them as well online. NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, has also been a partner on this grant. So they represent all of the sanitarians and or environmental health professionals around the country. And so both our private well class, which we developed for well owners, is actually available on their website now as a CEU provided class. And there's 10 lessons, each one's worth 1 CE. Through NEHA, it's free, and it's available to anyone. And it says home inspectors up here. We were actually contacted a few years ago by the a home inspectors association, a national association, and they wanted to use our class. And so we pointed out that it was already available on NEHA's website, that we should talk to them about coordinating. And it turned out they already had a relationship with NEHA, and now home inspectors all over the country can take our class, which is really important for understanding the issues they need to consider when they're inspecting somebody's well during a home inspection. And so NEHA provides national accreditation for our workshops and webinars, which is a great assistance to us and why some of you are here today, as well as provide information through their newsletter and things like that to their 15,000 environmental health professionals. So, and they also started a thing called the Private Well Network. You can look on their website and find out more information about that. And then the Water Systems Council is another partner. They operate, probably the most important thing that they do is they operate the well care hotline. They get upwards of 200 or 300 calls every month. EPA forwards calls to them, and it allows, they've developed a database of questions and answers, and they're able to provide a lot of support nationally for well owners in that way. But if you ever go to their website, watersystemscouncil.org, they also have a ton of materials available. They developed a well owner manual that actually has places for you to write information in. It's like if you're really diligent about taking care of your car and your oil changes, if you keep track of all that or have that all in one folder, this provides a way to do some of those things. But they have a ton of information on their website and help for well owners. And so those 3 organizations, national organizations that are part of the RCAP team, if you will, related to this private well program. So the other partner is us, the private well class at the University of Illinois. And I'm going to talk a little more about that because in essence, we team with the RCAP regions. They do all the in-person, boots on the ground type of work. and we have the online part of this, or a lot of it. Now, everyone's kind of shifted to online because of COVID, but we have a 10-lesson class. It's self-paced. You sign up, it sends you a PDF once a month or once a week, every week for 10 weeks. We had over 9,300 people sign up so far. We also do webinars like today, once a month, sometimes more than that even, and we work not only with well owners, but EHPs, realtors, labs. We do webinars on specific topics like lead or sewer or septic, and we've had a great amount of participation, especially since COVID hit. So, and as I mentioned, we have our class also on NEHA's website. We also have videos, podcasts, and I'll show some of that in a second. And we also helped develop some of the early materials for RCAP staff. When we first started this, RCAP was growing their team, so to speak, on the private well side. And so we had a bigger role in assisting them getting started. Now, 9 years down the road, they're all private well experts. Each of the regions runs its own program. They honestly, they don't need me anymore, which is awesome. And so we helped early on develop some of the tools they use, like the sanitary or the assessment tool, and it's available now as on a tablet version. And RCAP has went around the country doing these individual assessments, spending actual time with the well owner, and done over 2,500 of these collectively between the 6 regions. So this is our webpage, privatewellclass.org, and I'm just going to quickly go through some of our resources. You sign up, you take our class. We also have, as I mentioned, videos and podcasts. There's a complete version of this in Spanish. So if you work with folks who are native Spanish speakers who prefer to take the class this way, it's available, and you can get to that from our regular website as well. I mentioned we do webinars every month. Every July, we do one on septic systems. We actually have an RCAP staff person who is a sanitarian or an EHP, who's done a lot of septic inspections when he was with his local health district as the expert on those every year. And it allows us to really stress the importance of maintaining septic systems and all those things in relation to how they could affect your water quality. We also do specific ones on things like lead. The last time we did this was in 2018. This hasn't changed. We had an expert from Virginia Tech speak on this webinar. She had done Dr. Kelsey Piper. A lot of, I apologize, I forgot to turn off my phone. A lot of lead research with private wells, and so it's really a great tool to learn more about how lead can affect homes. And it's not a well water issue typically. It's a piping issue. It's lead solder, lead pipes, galvanized pipes. And the water can leach lead from that. It's not that it's native to the groundwater, very rarely. We even have a resource page to go along with that. It's just privatewellclass.org/lead. And we try to put resources up there that are all useful from those sources. There's a number of training videos, if you will. They're all 4 to 6 minutes long. Things like shared wells. A lot of people don't realize they buy a home and there's one well for 3 homes. Well, now all of a sudden you have to have a good relationship with the other 2, especially with the person whose well it's on their property. If there's no contract in place, no deed, it's not mentioned in the deed, any of those things, it can really be a problem. And we've seen a lot of conflict from that. And so it happens a lot more than I ever realized before we started this program. Even things like, why does my well keep losing pressure? Or how does my pressure tank work? That's the most popular video we've had. It's got over 400,000 views since 2016, and it tells us that a lot of people have pressure issues with their water system, and it can happen for varying reasons. It's just a short video to explain how that works. It's just meant to be useful. And again, for any of the things that we offer, you can always email us. We have a phone number and a info@privatewellclass.org email address, and we can try to help you. Or if it's a lot of the times we're pushing you back then to, or sending you to one of the RCAP regions for support. We have a newsletter that comes out once a month that's for professionals, for those who work with well owners. It usually includes a video, any new news. The USDA's rural development program changed their funding, and now they offer septic funding as well. We highlight things like that happen in our newsletter. And again, it's for partners or those that are professionals. Free to sign up, it's freely available. I want to mention we put on 2 conferences so far in 2017 and 2019, and the 2019 conference was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and this is the webpage for that. It's 2.5 days. All the presentations were recorded, and now they're all available online. So if you would like to look into that or are interested in learning from 26 different talks from professionals about private well issues, and it's not research, it's all practical things that you can take home and use with the well owners you serve. And so those are available, and we're also hosting one in 2 weeks, the 2021 conference. And I just want to mention, this is not for well owners. There's a number of activities that are geared towards professionals. And so the registration actually is fairly involved to describe what you do with well owners. And so it's just for professionals that serve well owners. And yeah, it's also, it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's just going to be 4 hours a day. This is my plug for that if you're interested. And like all the other things we do, it's all free. And so we have a great lineup. You can look at that and click on the draft agenda to see what that looks like. This trifold brochure, this is the front side and this is the back side. We offered this to some health departments to hand out. And so then as this grew as a program, we put it in our newsletter and we offered it to anyone who was interested in passing it out to the well owners they work with. And so we developed this, we print it, we ship it, we give it to you for free. And there's even a place on here where the yellow box is, which isn't actually on the brochure, for you to put your own label. And so you can pass it out. We have labs, the Indiana State Lab got 1,500 of these from us, and they put one in every sample result they send back to well owners. They put their logo on it. Some of the RCAP regions use these as well to give to well owners, but it's really just a tool to remind people they need to sample, follow best practices, and really they should sign up for this class. It's really a useful program. And it's also available in Spanish, and we've printed it 3 times so far, and we've had requests for almost 80,000 or about 80,000 brochures so far from about 400 different organizations. And so you can find this on our website or you can email us, but we're going to print another printing probably in July or August, and those won't be delivered. Actually, it says delivered in July or August, but we've moved that back a little bit. Right now is not a great time until things open up, and so we're holding off a little bit. But if you're interested in these, there's a form you can fill out, and it just asks, your contact information. We have to ship them, so we need a real address, and then how many of each kind you want. And so it's been a great program. People have ran out and asked for more. So yeah, just something for you to consider. So RCAP, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. Who are they? I mention them every webinar, and I show them that map of all the regions. But a lot of people really, unless you're in one of these fields, maybe haven't heard of them. So it's a national organization. They have a national office in DC, as I mentioned, and 6 regional affiliates that are really independent nonprofits. Together, well over 200 staff. And their mission is really to assist rural and economically disadvantaged areas of the country. I say boots on the ground support. I mean, in-person support. And a lot of their staff are water or wastewater operators. So a lot of the work they've done, at least I've been involved with and been around their staff, has been related to water and wastewater infrastructure management, funding, and operations. They help communities write grants to USDA to get funding for infrastructure upgrades. They give advice on how to run a plant or what kind of treatment they might need, all kinds of things, even doing GIS services for some small communities. They're really a great organization. They also work in other areas that I'm not that privy to, affordable housing and economic development in rural areas. I know they've really have a strong program in that area, as well as private well outreach, education, and support, which is what we're going to talk about today. And so, but because of their history and the kind of individuals they hire, they have sanitarians, water and wastewater operators, funders, grant writers, well inspectors. All that background can be brought to bear, so to speak, in our private well program. They understand the value of public health protection, sampling, treatment, why those things are necessary and the good they do and how they protect people from sickness and all those things. The other, to me, the most important part of all this, and this goes for us as well, is it's all grant funded. So all the services are free. So they're not in it for trying to create business for themselves. They're not in it to make their organization bigger. They're in it to do what's best for the well owner or the communities they're working with. So it's really their public good type of organization. And so, that's an important partner to have when you know they're looking at things not from how it's going to benefit them, but how it's going to actually benefit the client you're trying to reach or the person you're trying to reach. So just as a reminder, these are the regions, because if in a little bit, if you're going to reach out to them, you need to understand who your group is, so to speak, which region serves your state. And we have, I think, like I said, somebody from each one of the regions here today. So for RCAP's programs related to private wells, I should have put that up here at the top. There are over 30 staff involved between the 6 regions. And so the services that are part of the EPA grant are really workshops for well owners, some limited water quality testing. A lot of times those are done in conjunction with a well assessment and these on-site well assessments. Those are a really time-consuming thing. They're looking up well logs. Maybe one of the regions actually does test trips when they're out in the field. Sometimes they're doing sampling if the well has a particular, it looks like it's likely it could be contaminated. And so they're doing this one-on-one, teaching well owners how to take care of their well, talking to them about best practices. And it's really, it's an involved program, so to speak, and it can only be ran that way. It's not something you can do from a desk or the phone. So, and the regions, as they've grown in their private well programs, have started doing different things or more things. Some have included, these outreach events. They're going to field days or Earth Day celebrations, things like that. USDA has a loan program for low-income families or well owners that many of the regions, I don't think all do, but most are part of that program where they can actually offer loans to folks for rehab or drilling a new well. And now, as I mentioned earlier, septic training septic issues are involved in that too. Some are doing septic training. They have wastewater operators and they have on-site experts, on-site wastewater experts, and they're doing septic training in conjunction with the water quality training or even with housing training in some cases. And then some have special programs that are state or locally funded, as well as additional services through local or state grants. And I'll talk about a couple of those today. So Communities Unlimited is, they're based in Arkansas, includes Texas and Oklahoma and the Gulf area. They do the individual well assessments. The contact is Dave Miller and their website here. And I'm going to do this for all 6 regions really quick. That, some of them have special things, but all of them do the well assessments and all of them do well owner workshops. And then some of these other things they've built more on their own. And so we're trying to highlight all the work they do, not just that's under our EPA grant. They work with partners to do testing events. And, as one of the regions told me before our call today, their program's continually evolving and growing, because now that folks are starting to learn about what they do, they're getting calls from other folks, and it's growing in that respect. So I tried to include in their example partnerships some different types of partnerships they may have, because there's a wide variety of groups that RCAP works with and each of the regions works with. Great Lakes Community Action Partnership, which I call the Great Lakes RCAP, is Cindy Brooks, and they do well assessments and well owner workshops, as I mentioned. They're also part of the USDA loan program. They do displays at fairs. They assist, in Ohio anyway, they assist with applications for septic repair and replacement. And they're also doing a lot of assessments that are based on referrals or testing problems, where someone comes to them and says, hey, could you go out and do an assessment for this well? They're having these issues. And so again, it's, departments of health, soil and water conservation districts and counties, and they did some work with Marshall County, Indiana as well. Midwest Assistance Program, Jesse Campbell's the lead, and I've included their websites. And again, I'll mention this again, I'm sure, but once this is recorded or as it's being recorded, this will be on our website. You can get back to some of these links, or if you email us, we can send them all out to you. Jesse's done a lot of traveling, I know, just from following the work he's been doing, lunch and learn programs, 4-H type events or events for students, as well as you could see some of these organizations below. The Iowa Water Well Association, I know he has a booth there every year. Missouri Geological Surveys partner with him on some of the workshop he's done. And Kansas Environmental Health Association, I know one of our staff went out there at the same time that Jesse was also talking there. So wide variety of groups for these folks. And yeah, I just want to introduce everyone and make sure everyone's aware. Jeremy Parasol is the lead for RCAC, the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, which is based in California, but I believe they cover 15 states. Someone can correct me if that's not right. But California had a drought not too long ago, or still in some areas. And so the state of California developed a household well water grant program, which is actually much better terms than the USDA program. More money, and just it allows, the wells out there can be as much as 700 feet deep or more. And so RCAP can actually provide loans to folks, or sometimes grants, to have deeper wells installed in California because of the drought. They're working in Idaho under their septic grant and loan program. And again, they also offer the USDA, or they have in the past, I'm not sure if they're currently doing that, the USDA loan for low income families. And Self-Help Enterprises is a local nonprofit that works, it really does some of the same type of work, but only in 11 counties in the Central Valley of California. And they're working a lot in New Mexico and Nevada currently with regional health departments for conducting assessments and doing workshops. RCAP Solutions is the Northeast RCAP, and Mark Johnson's the lead. They cover all the Northeast, and then again, they're doing the assessments and the workshops with limited sampling. They also have several programs, one in Massachusetts, the North Central Massachusetts Private Well Program, where they're working with a number of partners to do a holistic, not only sample, but then look at even considering well regulations and how that might affect those areas where they have issues either with PFAS or other chemicals. And then working with the state of Vermont on this Village Wastewater Solutions Initiative, which also includes sampling. So there's an example of their partnerships here. Even the Rural Water Association in New York, which is awesome to work with, and Water Well Association is the Drillers Association, I'm assuming. So, and last, only by alphabetical order, is Joe Fields with Southeast RCAP, SIRCAP, and this is their website and Joe's contact information. They also do septic O&M and pump out program workshops, as well as a lot of partner referrals for individual assessments from realtors and other groups. And yeah, they're working all over the Southeast. And so the best thing for anyone who's interested in working with RCAP or any of the regions is to contact these folks first. First, take a look at their website. I think I'm probably getting ahead of myself. If you're a well owner, take a look at your region's website, get familiar with their program, find out when their next training or workshop is, if they're doing those. There are different times of the year, and most of them are online right now, so that's handy if you have the capability, internet access and stuff. Then contact your region if you have any questions, or if you'd like a well assessment, and if you want to bring a training workshop to your local area, you need to talk to your RCAP lead. They can work with you to identify the right partners, or where they might be, or if you can tag on to a workshop that's already going on. The other things, take our class, take the private well class if you haven't taken it yet. It's not this webinar, and a lot of people think our class are these webinars, but the private well class series of 10 lessons is much more detailed and provides a lot more basic and useful information for you to help you become a better steward of your well and protect your family and their drinking water. And again, these webinars are here to help you become a better steward and understand how to protect your well water. And yeah, so if you're a well professional, you should also reach out to your region if you're interested in partnering. Every region is a little different in the type of effort they're putting out there. If you're more interested in a septic event, for instance, find out and work with them directly. I would also encourage you to learn about their USDA or state-funded loan programs for those that have those, so that you're prepared when you get those questions from well owners. You know, it's a big topic, and unfortunately, unless the well owners meet certain economic criteria, there isn't a lot of support out there, especially for a grant or whatever. You can also request their participation as a speaker at your next event, or work with them to set up an online event. You know, they're more than willing to do those things, and you know, to support you and your local efforts, especially. And again, you should also take the private well class. And I mention that because when we do workshops, especially for EHPs, we always ask a question: how many of you have taken the private well class? And it's usually less than 10%. They know about our webinars, but they haven't actually taken the class. And the reason we have our class on NEHA's website is because when we started the private well class, 7 years ago or 8 years ago, over 20% of the people taking it were actually EHPs. And most of them said, why wasn't this available when I started my job? Because believe it or not, the amount of information available about private wells has significantly changed since we started 8 years ago. There used to be no training, very little training, and it was mostly specific for like drillers. And so that's changed. It's partly because of the work we've done. It's partly because CDC's provided funding for some states and counties to do more private well work. And so it's becoming a more vocal issue, if you will, which is a good thing. Our goal is really to try to raise up everyone's knowledge about wells, because a lot of people really don't know how to take care of them. So quickly, I've mentioned the assessments a number of times. I assume everyone's familiar with those, but if you're not, it's a multi-page form. It's like a sanitary survey for a private well, and you fill it out with the well owner. Like when RCAP does these, or we do these out in the field, we're actually looking for their well log first through the state or county or local resources, finding out whatever information we can about the property, so that when we go to meet with the well owner and ask questions like, what kind of pipes do you have, or do you have treatment, or when's the last time you had a water sample, or where's your septic system, all of that gets included. It's really a tool that once it's been completed, the well owner they give it back to the well owner, the copy back to the well owner, and it's a complete record of everything about their well, sources of possible contamination around their well, and a set of recommendations on how to best take care of their well and protect their water supply. And it also really encourages communication. And we have well owners tell us all the time, well, I can't call my local health department, they're going to condemn my well. 99% of the country, they can't do that. And well owners, when you call your health concerned, ask them that first. That's what I tell the health department: do you have any authority to condemn? And then they're there to help protect your health, just like we are. And so you should lean on your local health department. And that's one of the messages we try to get across in doing these assessments, is encouraging communication with local folks who know more about your water quality and your aquifers and well practices in that area. Because I'm in Illinois, I was born and raised here, and I've learned a lot about other parts of the country, but there's no way I could replace someone who's lived there their whole life and has that expertise. So RCAP's done over 2,600 of these around the country so far, which is awesome. They also have, we've stopped doing those workshops in person. We're doing them here at the University of Illinois online once or twice a year. Or a few years ago, they held over 40 workshops and led these 4-hour workshops to train professionals on how to use the assessment tool. And so that's also led to a lot of partnerships and support. Just like I'll use an example, I know one of the first states who asked RCAP to, they wanted to be able to refer well owners to them was Rhode Island Department of Health. They didn't have the staff to go out and investigate every one of the well issues that come up in Rhode Island. And so if it's really a problem and water quality is really a concern, they call RCAP Solutions, and RCAP Solutions goes out and tries to do an assessment and assist the well owner in person. It's a great service. Again, the EPA pays for it, so it's all free to the well owner and to the organization requesting it. And it's a good way to build all those relationships and know that well owners actually have some support. Okay, so that's what I had for the presentation today. There were a number of questions, and we didn't answer all of them. We actually answered a fair number of them. Again, if you have a question, you can put it in the question or chat box. Katie's monitoring that, and as we move through. And at this point, I will also mention that if there's something specific, I know a few of these are state specific. If any of the RCAP folks on the call, you can unmute yourself and feel free to add in if you so desire. Okay, I thought this was interesting. I'm not sure someone maybe is just frustrated, but how do I actually contact RCAP? I've not been successful in reaching anyone. Well, today we gave you all the information you need to actually reach out to them, but you can also always reach out to me. Matter of fact, usually at least 1 or 2 people on every one of our webinars ask about an assessment after we've given the presentation that includes that information. And so I find out where you live, and I forward your information on to one of the folks in that region, usually the folks that are on this call. And we've had great responses. I'm surprised this is an issue, but if you try contacting the person that's on this list, or you can email us and I will send you the right contact if you tell me where you live. And again, this is being recorded, so by the end of the week, this entire webinar, you can go find it on our website and or on our YouTube channel, and you can find each of the person's contact information. What do I test for? We get this question every month. We usually include it anyway, and so I want to point out that what we're telling people in this list is a general list for water quality for the whole country. There are other, some states have very little arsenic, for instance, so it's not maybe necessary to sample for arsenic, or some other constituent. It's not only, this is what we recommend. So 2 things. 1, annually test for coliform and nitrate. The reason you test for coliform and nitrate is because they shouldn't be in your well if it's properly sealed, and nitrate shouldn't be in your well water at an elevated level. Natural occurring arsenic or nitrate is, and even in the Midwest, is around 3 parts per million. If it's higher than that, the standard is 10 for health effects. If it's higher than that, then somehow it got into your well. And so really what you're testing for annually by testing for coliform and nitrate is you're ensuring the integrity of your well. There's not a crack in it. There's not, the lid's not open. If you've been around very many wells, you've seen everything there is to see: coffee cans, open holes, floating animals, all kinds of stuff. That's not properly protecting your well and your well water. And so by testing for coliform and nitrate annually, you're testing to see if your well still has integrity and it's protecting from surface contamination. And that's really the purpose. Coliform itself is not a health risk. E. coli is. So in addition to that, every 3 to 5 years, we recommend testing for this suite of metals and inorganics. And really, it gives you a good understanding of the groundwater quality you have. We talk about copper, zinc, and cadmium because of piping. You can have lead pipes, and it doesn't mean that you have lead in your drinking water. The water has to be corrosive or aggressive and leach lead for it to actually come off the pipe and be in your water. If the water's not corrosive, sometimes it can even be scale forming. And so instead of having the lead's inside of your pipe, it's got scale on it that doesn't even, so it's not even touching, the water's not even touching the lead anymore. And so you need to understand your water quality to know if lead is an issue, or copper or zinc or cadmium, because if your pH is low or you have high alkalinity or chlorides, then you can have aggressive water, and that's when you need to be concerned about the type of piping you have. And a lot of rural homes especially are older, and until 2014, even lead solder on copper pipes was enough lead to leach and cause a problem. So that's anyway, this is kind of the list. that we put out that's meant to be a general list. You should also talk to your local health department and find out if there's anything in your area that might be specifically a consideration, something we wouldn't normally want to test for, but there's, especially out east, you have radionuclides, you can have other things, and it's situational based on your location. And known contaminants, if you're next to a gas station, then you should be concerned, especially if it's been there for a long time. All those things go into play on what you should test for. And I'm gonna give you a few examples. The other thing to do is to look online. Find out what your state or local health district, or maybe your geological survey, or who knows, may have information on water quality. So Mass DEP has this website. You type in your address and they'll tell you if you're at risk, if you have a bedrock well, of arsenic or uranium. And so, you should test for uranium if they say that it's a risk in your area. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't do that. This is Rhode Island. This is on Rhode Island Department of Health's website. All those little dots are where there used to be orchards. And so much arsenic was used through the 60s that all the soil at these orchards is contaminated with arsenic. And in some cases, that's leached into the groundwater. And so they plotted this at this scale. It's not very helpful. But the real reason I show this map is that other splotch, the big splotch in the middle, that's where they have elevated beryllium. I'll be honest, when I found this on their website, probably in 2014, I did not realize beryllium was a regulated contaminant, but it is. It's regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Any communities that have beryllium in their water have to treat it below a specified level because it has health effects and it's dangerous for consumption. I would never recommend all over the country that everybody test for beryllium, but obviously if you're in this area, they know it exists, you'd want to add beryllium to your list of constituents you test for. And this is a great example to show for a webinar like this, just because of that fact. You need to be inquisitive and you need to ask. And the folks locally, or like your geological survey or Department of Environmental Health, whatever, DEQ, whatever it might go by, that maps or investigates water quality in your state. And this isn't a spill, it's just there. It's a makeup of the Earth's crust, if you will. And so you need to understand things, and that's why as a well owner, you need to be informed and understand where those resources might be. In some states, like Wisconsin, have developed this really cool mapping tool. I went in and said arsenic by county, and it's showing me all the data they have. This slide's actually probably 3 or 4 years old. I was just on the site and I meant to update it and I forgot, but it's changed. They've modernized this even a little more, and there aren't any blank counties anymore. If you notice up by the Route 8, up near the top, the county's clear. That means they had no samples for that area. But all the other counties, you can see less than 5 micrograms per liter, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. And the red areas near Green Bay, over 21 parts per billion, which is micrograms per liter. So the health standard set by the EPA for the Safe Drinking Water Act that every community in the country has to meet is 10 parts per billion. And so there are no rules in Wisconsin that say a well owner has to drink water less than 10 parts per billion. It's up to you as the well owner to know what's in your water and decide if you're willing to drink it or not. And I say that because I've done a lot of arsenic research in Illinois, and I run across people all the time who are drinking water that have maybe even over 100 parts per billion of arsenic. And they look at me and say, my grandpa lived to be 86. I'm drinking from the same well he grew up on. I'm not going to do anything. It's not going to hurt me. And maybe it won't hurt them. But statistics and everything else says that drinking water elevated in arsenic can cause health problems, even cancer. And so that's the advice, I'm obligated to tell them. If they want to drink it, it's their business. But if you want to be diligent and protect your family, all those things matter. And if these resources are available, and I believe more states are going to provide this type of resource in the near future, just because our technology has improved so much, and it really should be available. It shouldn't be hidden. I know some people worry about property values, things like that, but it's important that we all understand what the water quality is. There's a simple solution. You add treatment, and there's a lot of homes in Illinois that are high in arsenic where they have added treatment, and as long as you're maintaining your treatment system, it's really not that big a deal. It's treating it just like if you're on a community water supply. So well disinfection, we had a question about, should I periodically disinfect my well? No, You should only disinfect your well when it needs it, and that's determined by sampling that shows you have bacteria in your well. Using chlorine to disinfect your well, chlorine's an oxidant, so it can release metals from the piping, from your pump, if it's a submersible, or metals in the rock if you have a bedrock well. Yeah, there's a USGS study that shows where they started adding chlorine into this well regularly in New Mexico, and all of a sudden the metals that are in the natural bedrock started going off the chart because they created an environment where it was releasing them from the rock. So you don't want to use chlorine in your well unless you have to. But if you do have bacteria and you need to shot chlorinate your well, we recommend you use this document. It's from the Minnesota Department of Health, and it's available. You can find it on our website. We have a set of resources for each of the 10 lessons, and under lesson 10, which is called Water Treatment Solutions, one of the documents that you can link to is this. And we reviewed probably 70 to 80 different documents on how to shot chlorinate your well. Some are really good, some are really poor, some don't consider a lot of things they need to, and none are perfect, including this one, but this is probably the best one in our opinion, and so this is the one we choose to share with people all over the country. And the Minnesota Department of Health is one of the more aggressive, proactive, better funded health departments in the country. They put out a lot of great useful information, and they're a good resource on a lot of topics. It includes pictures, tells you how to mix it. You don't want to mix it, you got to mix it so it's at a certain concentration rather than pour it straight, because again, as that's hitting the pipes and the casing, it can cause changes in the chemistry of the water or leach things from the metal. Even tells you what to do with your softeners and different kinds of treatment equipment. It suggests you go to WQA.org, which is the Water Quality Association. They're the association that represents all of the makers of household treatment devices. They also have a certification program for treatment purveyors. Yeah, they're really in the game of trying to protect folks. They're a good organization. We work with them a lot. Funding sources. What are potential funding sources for well owners? As I mentioned, you can contact your RCAP region to see what they offer. But honestly, unless you're below a certain income criteria level, there aren't a lot of opportunities there. I think California would be the exception there because of their program. But we actually hosted a webinar in October on funding and financing. And what we did is we searched the internet, even for local groups, and it's not just for constructing a well or replacing a well, but for septic, for testing, for abandoning wells, and I encourage you to check that out. It's available on our website, and you don't have to remember this URL. You can just go to under webinars. If you scroll over webinars on our website, a drop down says past webinars, and you can scroll through those until you get to October 13th, and you can watch that at your leisure. And so we did get one community water question. So this is someone who's familiar with RCAP and understands that they work with communities a lot. So I usually wouldn't have included this question, but I thought since we have everybody here and obviously they're familiar with RCAP, I would go ahead and leave it in, because some of you, our county health departments in Illinois don't work with communities in the Safe Drinking Water Act, but in some states they do. And so some of you may actually be also involved in your community primacy program. And so I left it in here. Basically, they're asking, how do I get information to the operators for these small community water systems? Now, if somebody has small community water systems, I'm guessing they're probably like mobile home parks. And so, and I might be wrong there. Somebody correct me if you want. But RCAP, that's their bread and butter, honestly. That's what they do. They work with small rural water systems to help them become sustainable, understand the risks, optimize their treatment and operations, all those sorts of things. And so I encourage you to reach out to the lead that is on the call today from your region, and if they will get you in touch with your state lead or one of their other staff who's a TAP, a technical assistance provider for community water systems. And then you can talk to them about more specifics about your situation or situations, since you said there's more than one. In this question, how do we better support individual homeowners on the Crow Reservation in Montana? There are approximately 800 individual home wells. Many are old and aged out, or close to drain fields. Well, so Jesse's on the call. He's with MAP. Montana is one of the MAP states. He and the MAP folks in Montana would be the people to talk to about that. And I would also make sure your 800 individual homes are aware of the private well class there. Jesse, anything else to add?
Yeah, can you hear me, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. We do already work on the tribal nation there. We have a technical assistance provider that assists with water and wastewater. I believe they're already working with Lodge Grass and possibly another community. So we already have a presence in the area, and I'd be more than happy to come out and make any partnerships and put on any training and provide any education or assistance that we can.
Great, thank you. So how many feet is typical to drill down for a well, and are there laws that apply to this and why? So one thing I didn't put in this, quickly I'll say, is most states require at least 50 feet of casing unless there's you get a variance. And that's not always true, but a lot of states do. But how deep you drill is really dependent on where there's water, potable water at your specific location. That's why every well is so different. You may have 3 aquifers at different depths where you're at. It depends on your geology and your location. And it also depends on the water quality. We have an area in Illinois where the first bedrock aquifer that has, aqua tards or aquicludes, which are material that don't let water through, separating it, is actually salt water. So you have to drill through it and case it to get to deeper water that's fresh water. I know that doesn't make sense necessarily, but it's because the bedrock in the ground isn't flat. A layer that's, for instance, the deep aquifer in the Chicago area, they're drilling 1,600 to 1,800 feet wells. That same aquifer is at land surface 50 miles away because the bedrock's at a slant. So it really depends on where you're at. The way to find out, though, is to look up nearby well logs. If they're available in your state, or maybe your local health department might be able to provide you some of those. And if not, your local drillers should already know how deep you need to drill in your area. They've probably drilled a lot of wells nearby. But to do that independently, you need to look up logs. And more and more states have their logs online. Illinois does. California just released all of theirs a couple years ago and have a really nice system where you can see all the logs in the state. The problem is too, though, that many wells are not in the files. So Illinois started requiring construction logs in 1968, and we were one of the first states. And yet we still probably don't have about half the wells in our files. That's because they were drilled before that. Or early on, some drillers, they're old school and did it the same way, and the state wasn't going to tell them what to do or whatever. But other states, like New York, didn't pass a law to do that until 2000. So they actually only have about 10 to 15% of their well logs on file with the state, which is unfortunate. And so a lot of folks in New York State aren't going to be able to find a well log. And what I recommend then is you talk to a local driller, they'll know, and then maybe look for your neighbor's wells. If, like we have a mapping tool, you can zoom right into your location and you can find your well log if there is one. So, and as far as the laws that apply to this, as I mentioned earlier, every state but Alaska and Pennsylvania have well construction code, which means you have to follow a code, you have to be a licensed driller. And so there's a lot of rules that apply to that. So the materials are specified, how deep you have to drill, how far away your setbacks have to be from everything from a septic tank to a building to you name it, a feedlot. They all have setbacks that are required. And in some cases, if it's a small lot and they can't do that, they have to try to get a variance. In some states, the rules are all different, so it's really specific to where you live. But it's a lot more complicated, but it's fairly protected these days. So, and that's a good thing. So silt in my water. Why is there silt in my water? Well, silt's a fairly common occurrence, especially in bedrock wells where the rock may be fairly friable. And so as water moves through, it wears the rock and it becomes a silty layer on the bottom. And then when you pump it, you're getting that silt's coming up through. So I'm not a geologist, but really the only solution is a filter on your system, probably prior to your pressure tank. So, and this is the person who asked me a question last week, someone that has a really serious, extreme silt problem, which is unfortunate. They're actually scooping cups out of the back of their toilet of silt. And that's really, the only way to deal with that would be a settling basin, like a cistern or some kind of tank before you bring it into your home, and then you'd pump out of that tank for the water going in your house and to keep your pressure tank, at a constant pressure. And that's the only other option would be to drill a different well and drill through to a different unit. It's possible that the part of the well that's providing the silt isn't at the bottom, and so if you could case that off, you could prevent it. You might have to add a lot more casing than a typical bedrock well would have, but it might solve that silt problem. The issue there would be knowing exactly where it's coming from, and you'd probably have to camera the well, and there'd be some expense there, but it's going to probably be a continual issue for anyone who has silt. We do see once in a while where there's problems like this, where they've actually just put in a new well inside the old well, narrower, and they actually ran casing all the way down and have a screen. But again, that wouldn't be cheap at all. And it might not be possible depending on the size of the well casing. But sometimes when there's a problem near the top of the well, especially, they'll put a sleeve in. If there's a crack in the casing or something like that, they may put a sleeve inside to protect that. Then you'd probably need to talk to a contractor about those options. But hopefully if it's not too bad, the best thing to do would put like a 5-micron filter. I showed a picture earlier and it looked like the 2 paint rollers. Those were 5-micron filters. One of them was a new one that was white, and the one that was completely black was after 1 month in Illinois groundwater where there's high manganese and iron. And that's, it's meant to remove iron. And so that's what it looks like. And he has to replace that once a month. So,
Steve,
okay.
This is Cindy from Great Lakes, and I've run across this on one instance. I would recommend that they also test for bacteria, because that can be an indication of a flaw or a problem with their casing as well, that something has cracked it or damaged it, or that maybe in the type of metal, which was the case that we've run into in Ohio.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so speaking of Ohio, I looked at the well logs in the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Basically, they found 6 logs without addresses. And the driller who drilled those 6 wells doesn't exist anymore. They're out of business. And so the county hasn't been able to help them, so they're just not sure. They can't find the well log. So as I mentioned before, sometimes you just can't find a well log. But in this case, I would say it's sounds like it could be likely that one of those 6 logs without addresses could be their well. And one thing to do would be to evaluate the differences in the 6 logs. So if they're all almost the same, they're all 200 to 220 feet deep, the geology is the same on the log, all those things, then your well's likely similar. But the only way to know for sure would be to measure the depth. And if you measure the depth of the well, if, for instance, those 6 logs are very different in depth, you could find it that way, although it may not be exact. So there's no simple solution, but it's also, we've been out to sample people's wells, and they tell me their well's 200 feet deep, and we hit bottom at 86. I remember that number because they had no idea they only had an 86-foot well, and so sometimes people think they know what's going on there and they really don't. And so measuring your well will at least help you address, based on the geology on the logs nearby. The geology may be a little different at your home, but it's probably going to be close. And so you'll have an idea of where your water's coming from, what formation, and all those things, even if you don't have a log. I know we did an assessment for a gentleman south of Champaign here where I live, and it's very flat ground. His well was drilled the same year as a neighbor farm well, but there was no log for his, just his neighbor's. And you know, we ended up measuring the depth of the well because, and it turned out it was about the same depth. And so we know it's in the sand and gravel aquifer called the Glassford, and we could give him that information, and we know there's arsenic in it. So we told him he should test for arsenic, and so it's valuable information to have if there's a way to do it. Although if you have a contractor come out to do those things, obviously there's going to be an expense. So, so these are the folks that are on the call. I just want to put this up at the end. I am going to, it looks like we have at least a couple questions. So, yeah, I'm going to pull this up and over. Again, you can email us. I'm on the wrong page now here. There we go. So thanks for attending, and let me bring this over and make it full screen. And so, okay, the first question we have, does anybody from any of the RCAP folks want to mention anything before I get started? That's fine if not. Okay. You mentioned that once the state offered free water well testing for Illinois residents, is there any chance our state might offer that again? There is not. In fact, it's really disappointing because it was a great service, and we assumed it was actually in our statutes that we were supposed to provide that. But recently, because of all the state budget problems and the referendum that didn't pass last November, our testing program was called into question because we offer testing at about $50 or $60, where a full set of samples at a private lab of the same constituents would be over $200 or $250. And so the U of I's some office there questioned our pricing practices because we can't compete with private labs. That's a law. And no one can find that statute. That apparently doesn't exist. That apparently was someone's goodwill decision at the State Water Survey some 50 or 60 years ago. And so now we have to charge full price. And our pricing structure is going to change, and there's going to be no advantage to, and you know, we rely on that data to understand the aquifers of Illinois. So bottom line is no, and I won't go on any more about that. Should I test for PFAS chemicals, and if so, where and how? Okay, so we've answered this on previous webinars, and I don't, you know, there's, I would say that you don't test for PFAS just as a matter of course, because it's very expensive. There's more labs coming online, but you'd have to talk to a private lab that actually does that kind of testing. We don't, and I don't know the details. I can't imagine it to be that much different than any other samples. What you really need to do is understand where PFAS exists and why. So you need to do a little work to understand that if you're near an airport, you know, my office is right near the Fire Training Institute, where they do fake fires all the time and have folks coming from all over the country to train. I guarantee you our groundwater near there, which, you know, it's all city water, so there's no one using groundwater there, has PFAS chemicals in it. So it's understanding what the risk is, because it's, you know, it is expensive. And I'm not saying don't test if you really are uncomfortable and you're concerned, but you can look up, every state regulates labs to perform compliance samples for all the communities in the state that have to meet the rules of the Safe Drinking Water Act. So every community in your state that has a public water supply has to test every 3 months for a suite of analytes. And so those labs have to be certified through a program, an ELAP program, and you can go to your state primacy agency, like in Illinois, that's the Illinois EPA, Ohio, it's the Ohio EPA, in Minnesota, it's the Minnesota Department of Health, whoever your primacy agency is that regulates that program, and they have a page where they list all the labs that are allowed to do compliance sampling because they have to meet certain criteria. That's where I would start for a list of labs to call to see if they're if they do PFAS testing. So do any of, I don't know if anybody else has anything to add there. I know some of you folks work with some of the RCAP folks, work with some of the communities, and may have. I think it's on the contaminant candidate list, and so there's a number of communities in the country that are testing for it now, and they're getting ready to regulate it. So, yeah. I'd like information about non-salt-based treatments for iron and sulfates. Well, I am not a treatment expert, and so I can try to get you in touch with someone, but where I would start with that question is the Water Quality Association. It's just wqa.org. You can go to their site. I believe you can ask a question. You can get contact information for sure there. And they, I know they have a list of treatment purveyors that are providers in local areas. They have a search tool that you can look for, find someone locally around the country who might be able to answer that. And it also lists if they've been accredited to them or they've taken their certification training and all those sorts of things. Because, if, I can also ask my direct boss, who is a geochemist. He's likely to know the answer to this, but I don't. So if you want to email me, you can do that too. Okay. I think that's it for today. We're going to end just a hair early. Anyone want to add anything? Any of the RCAP folks?
Steve, just a comment from Great Lakes RCAP. If they are trying to contact us, the best way is not to use the WSOS Community Action. It's now Great Lakes Community Action Partnership. So it's glcap.org is where they'll find the RCAP program.
Yeah, and I tried to make sure that's what I used. Yeah.
Or email me. You had my correct email. So if they would just contact me directly, I'll get them directed to the correct location.
All right, thanks. Okay, well, thank you for attending. I appreciate all you guys being online today. And I know I'll see some of you are here, in 2 weeks at our conference. So thanks for attending, everyone, and have a great day.